Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and in my previous video that I released, should be the same day as I'm recording this on YouTube, this is going to be the extra day 2 stuff. I will eventually release this. And first I want to take a look at kind of like statuses and just kind of where this team is at. I have quite a lot of earth resistance on Shurika, for instance. Because there are cases where just one of these characters can really mess with a whole team full of an element in certain cases. And she can do really well into Earth. And potentially I could get this higher, but Earth has a lot of overlap with evasion, and I'm going for a lot of status resistance in this party in general. But, hello Discord, you're getting this video early because thank you for joining the Discord. Gotta be some perks, right? And this is one of them. So if you're listening to this later on YouTube and you're like, hey, this video is pretty cool, I wish you had just posted this one first. Well, that was actually the way that it happened on Discord. So there are maybe some people watching this who haven't even seen the first video yet. And I want to, put a grain of salt on something I said in that video. While there's a lot of good commentary on this team in general, the more that I play with it, the more that I realize that some of the TMR selections that I made in that video, while they make sense for Lucielle, they make basically no sense on this team, and you can get more power with something else. And for this, I'm mainly going to be using Minwoo's TMR to fill that slot, because it gives me disable, confusion, and stun resistance, and all three of those are a pretty big deal. Especially with the Garza being in the meta. I mean, Agrius can disable as well, so can Lucielle, of course. And we're going to hopefully see some of that in this video. But, long load screen. But, so the Smiling Goddess, which is Addison Ray's TMR, which allows you to raise critical rate and start removing haste on crit. Well, that's not super important for this team because Shurika can already remove haste with her follow-up attack. And does so even more reliably than this effect. On the other hand, another TMR that I tried out on her, which I think she uses in a really interesting way if you make sure to set her buffs up right so that she uses it at all, but Blade Stream for AP denial. But Shurika's follow-up attack also removes AP auto restore, and Gilgamesh can straight up cancel out and even make AP auto restore work in a negative way with Frostbite. So there's plenty of options for this team for dealing with that scenario as well. These don't really add anything to the team, but they do, I guess, kind of deepen those strategies. Maybe it's not the worst thing, but considering the overlap, which may make the effort kind of unnecessary, then maybe it's worth it to trade that for some extra HP and a few extra status ailment resistances. This team does really well into evasion. I didn't find any evasion teams in the previous video while I was playing in class match. So I also, in the previous video, I didn't manage to get off Blade Stream because I hadn't turned off Ritual of Quickening, which is what she will use as her single target buff. She prefers to buff other people before herself, and that's part of the reason that she doesn't use the Blade Stream buff super early in the fight. So this team has a good bit of AP auto restore, so let's see if we can play with that. That's also going to reduce their chances to silence. Now, the entirety of this team at this point, I believe, has at least 25 silence resistance, if not even considerably more. I think maybe at least 2 of these characters are sitting at 50 silence resistance, actually. Which means that even with his boosted rates, Mont is never going to be able to silence both of my DPS. And hopefully he just doesn't get in range to attack Lucielle. If Lucielle gets in range to attack them, though, since they're an evasion team and she's not particularly accurate, she's going to switch into the skill that I wish she used a lot more often. Maybe turning Divine Flaying off You know, the more I see her use that instead, the more I wish she used Nail of Dependence, I think? I don't remember. Because she doesn't use it very much. But it's their guaranteed hit skill. It's also an AoE skill, and it also inflicts disable. If you can land disable on an evasion unit, it's no longer able to evade anyone on your team. So, cool. She is deeply anti-evasive, and if I get into a situation where Shurika doesn't have the raw accuracy to hit characters, then this can basically make them stand still so that I can hit them. It also boosts the damage of Fey Treachery, so she does have a 2-attack combo here that will further take advantage of them being disabled. And just use that to deal even more damage. But hey, now they can't dodge it. So we see Mont here in particular got himself disabled. You would think the lightning unit would not have as good of a matchup into a particularly influential earth unit, but I guess if you don't build for disable resistance, it can get you. Again, this is usually only in the scenarios where, like, people rush to her, or she's the last person on the field and she just can't hit anything, but she is in range for damage. Because again, she doesn't really like to attack people, and she will, even in evade matchups, probably heal more than anything else. But she will occasionally, when everyone else is topped up around her, say, okay, it's damage time, and just start disabling people. So that's a pretty wild anti-evasion counter, and because it's so good, I would even say, I looked at this in the sub-job a little earlier in the video, I would turn off, let's say, Death Bond, because in theory, this could be a really good way of dealing with evasion as well. If you can't hit them, you can still Death Bond them. And honestly, the effects of it are kind of terrible. I would rather turn them into a frog or something like Halloween Elia can do, but it's something. It's also not dependent on being able to hit the character, so again, works perfect in evasion matchups. The thing is, she's never really going to use it anyways, because Knell of Dependence is just better. It does damage. She wants to do damage. So it's almost kind of pointless in her kit, which kind of makes me feel like I don't need to turn it off. I mean, I'm sure the first time I see her use it, I'll want to turn it off. Maybe I should do, just for giggles, but, the one thing I will say that I said in the previous video is definitely a really good TMR for her, and definitely a really good TMR for like anybody who can wear it into this meta. This could also be Shurika as well, but the Bellflower dress, because it gives you remove, haste, and regen on hit. That's pretty cool. Even with her follow-up hit already doing half of that, teams like the one that I'm going up against right now, my team has 25% stop resist minimum. I think Lucielle nullifies it, because she has 50% stop resistance, and then no, I think she's 75% stop resist. She was at nullification at one point in this video, I will say, but then I realized that was kind of redundant, because like I think 40% is the highest stop effect in the game. You don't need more than 50, and I didn't really want to change her Esper, so I just left her with 75. But my point here is that a couple of them have at least 50 stop resistance, so Agrius isn't going to be able to stop anyone on this team, or either of those characters on this team. But in addition to that, the ones that have 25 stop resistance, if I could remove that regen, they'd be safe too, and that would really lower kind of the building threshold to be able to get around Judgment Blade with Agrius, because that is really significantly like her most impactful attack in a number of ways. It doesn't even fully counter it. The defense and spirit penetration debuffs are still going to do what they do, but not being stopped by it is game changing, in exactly the same way that being stopped by it can be game changing. But you can see this team is really, really stubborn, and honestly I'm going to make it look kind of silly later on in this video. But before I get to that point, I want to give you a little bit of a kind of a reference point for some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in how to beat this team, because it is absolutely beatable, and you may have kind of been putting together some of the elements of how it's beatable already, and I've definitely shown you teams previously that can beat it. So we're going to take a look at that towards the end of the video. But before I get into that, I want to talk about a concept that I want to do like a full-length video about. It was something that I found on an MTG podcast of all places. It's called the Strategy Triangle, and this applies to a lot of like tactical games like this. You know, whether it's Magic the Gathering or War of the Visions, there are basically three main strategies for winning the game. Now, obviously Magic goes in a bunch of different directions, and you could go into a bunch of niches or sub-games here too, but typically speaking, there are three main strategies. Rush, which prioritizes offensive pressure, speed manipulation, specifically for them, but sometimes by lowering the CT of opponents, you can help create kind of a wombo combo situation where you just get a lot of turns in a row, and kind of no matter what they've got going for you, you're probably going to hit them very hard through that, if you can line it up right against their team at least. The second strategy is economy. So I talked about battle economics, and this really isn't a way that I think people tend to think about this game. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't think about these things, but they don't think about it as such. We don't think about it as like economy. So economy is kind of a midpoint, like maybe a balanced strategy in some ways. I think a lot of teams kind of resemble economy teams, or could become economy teams with the right tuning. And what I mean by an economy team is you want to create an advantage in some way in the game that allows you to win, right? And you can do that through the game's economy. For instance, if I run AP Auto Restore and AP Denial, like in this instance, if I could blast them with Blade Stream and remove their AP Restore, I could basically make this Sephiroth. I could basically make it so that the Sephiroth doesn't really pose that much of a threat to me in the late game. And then if I could, you know, for a team like the one that I'm running, you know, we're all mages, so we have a ton of AP to begin with. We're winning that fight. Like, we're just going to slap every turn, and you're going to have a hard time keeping up with that. On the HP economy, like, Sephiroth teams tend to be really good at this, and we're kind of seeing an example of this here. Sephiroth having Curse, he can just absolutely disrupt the opponent's HP economy, especially in the HP recovery department. And he's also a character that is really good at recovering his own HP independently through battle. So he kind of fights on both sides of that, right? You know, he's trying to drive a wedge in this particular way against your opponents. So let's take a look at some status resistances, and I'm going to do some stuff with trust runes. And essentially, what I'm realizing here is that there are certain statuses that are floating around out there that I really need to deal with, because this team is really good in most scenarios, but if I run into one of those teams, I can get countered by it. Now, there's not a ton of things that you can do on the defensive side for trust runes, so technically, there's at least 5 solid slots that you could use to give yourself various status resistances. Now, these are only going to reduce the chances for a lot of the stronger status attacks and effects within the game, but at the same time, for a lot of them, you really only need the base amount of resistance, 25, to completely nullify it. So, I mean, having the right trust runes in terms of status could change your matchup in so many games that you might lose otherwise. At least more to random chance. So I'm going to focus on that here and, you know, try to not overlap the strengths that I already have, the strengths that my Espers already have, for instance. And, you know, I don't have to go too far past 50 for most things. Curse, if I want to deal with Sephiroth, needs to be 75, but that's only really going to be possible for Shuriken. So I'm just... Oh my gosh. I just realized how long this part of the video is. I mean, I could only double it in speed. You guys, check back in with me about 20 minutes. Oh, I guess another thing that I'm doing here, I'm also trying to focus on like what not only what the status resistances are for my espers, but what the elemental resistances are for my espers. Tetrasylphid, in addition to the Rama, Dark Rama Vision card, is giving, I think like 25 Earth resistance to Shurika, and then in addition to that, Rama is giving both Shurika and Lucielle 15 Earth resistance, which is enough to get Lucielle positive for Earth, which is helpful because there are situations where it can be down to like her and someone else and Sottily, and she has to keep that character alive, and since he's an AoE unit, she has to keep herself alive too. So she can heal herself back up to full, and if you're just fighting one unit, like if you whittled them down to that, you can still lose here because of his AoE skills. But so the cool thing about her is, especially with, if you can get that resistance positive even a little bit and throw in some of her other buff pattern to really like beef her up, then she can survive like one hit of his stuff, even maybe with pursuit. Hopefully you've got Shurika around to remove that pursuit, as she... Oh no, wait, I don't think she can do that. Never mind. I don't think she removes follow-up hits. I don't remember. But, you know, and we'll see a scenario where I have to do just that. But, oh, I just realized I didn't tell you about the third strategy. Man, I'm trying to keep up with the way that I edited this video, and I did it on my phone because I've had to be out and about today, which has made a lot of this harder. Anyways, the third strategy is sustain, and this can also be called defense, but I would call it sustain because I think at this point defense is the bare minimum, and sustain really implies that you can regain your health, and this team does a little bit of all of those things, but I would really call it an economy team. It can rush in with damage, and it has a lot of ways of supporting that. Especially Lucielle's support can make this team a lot faster through haste and that kind of thing. So while they're not the fastest team in the beginning, if they're going up against a faster team than them that doesn't have haste, they can catch up to them. In addition to that, they also really play with the HP economy. Both Gilgamesh and Shurika are really good at healing. They also both have healing skills themselves, which is kind of ridiculous, especially to run them with Lucielle. But if Lucielle can keep them healed, because they aren't going to be good at doing it on offense, you want her to stay behind and heal them, then they can just focus on the damage, and that's for the best. But they do kind of have a backup plan in this. That being said, both Shurika and Gilgamesh are in different ways very vulnerable to certain types of damage, and damage being applied to them particularly quickly, because even though Lucielle is very good at helping units survive explosive levels of damage, if you can keep it coming and keep it consistent, then you have a chance, especially early on in the game, to overwhelm at least one unit on this team. And if you can, you might be able to turn the tables on them, because then you start lapping them, and there's just all sorts of ways that things go wrong. And Lucielle, while she is a great healer, one of the things that she doesn't have on her sister, one of the few things, is that she can't bring anyone back to life. She can heal people while they're alive, but when someone goes down, then you have a problem with this team. So naturally what that means for this team is that in terms of the strategy circle, they have aspects of kind of all three, but they are mainly an economy team for just a lot of reasons. They have a lot of denial, and they also have a lot of empowerment. A lot of those line up to ensure that other teams can't do what they're doing. Because again, even if the other team is faster than you, if you have haste and they can't keep it on their units, you're going to catch up with them. There's just a lot of ways that they play for economic advantages to make this team work, and there's a lot of kind of deep strategy in how they do that, and how that just very well pertains to where the meta is at right now. So at this point, maybe you're asking yourself, how do you beat a team like this? And you've seen me lose a couple of times. Again, I have to concede that while I have improved the build a lot since the first video, I still don't have the ideal vision cards. There's still a lot of ways that this build isn't ideal and is kind of underpowered. But one of the keys to overwhelming it is just being really rushy. And pretty much every aspect of the rush strategy really messes with me here. For one, getting to me, because I have a long buff rotation, there's a lot of cool stuff that I want to get set up before I come out. So I'm not really going to be rushing forward that much. And in this fight in particular, because both of us had set our initial placement a little bit forward, I think, if I remember this fight correctly, because I was monologuing instead of watching when it started. Gilgamesh went out front first because they started relatively far up. He didn't get... He didn't get his buffs off at all. So, we got baited, but also the fact that this is kind of a rushy opponent that's using Curse, that's using a lot of agility to bring the fight to me instead of allowing me to set up and bring the fight to them. We can't handle this much pressure, basically, is what I'm saying. A team that is rushy enough can counter teams like this pretty well. And you really want to just have big, explosive, bursty damage. Now, that being said, I haven't necessarily lined up into the best teams for this so far. Both doing this in blind PvP, and I've faced a pretty good variety and won against most of it, so that's good. And especially when I can choose my matchup in Arena, I do pretty well. And you know what? It just got to a point where, like, when you take more damage from the preemptive counterattack than you can do with your LB, you just quit. There were a number of people who saw this team and were like, "Are you kidding me?" I dip. Like, it happened to me a number of times too. But also, I had to cut out a lot of the footage in this particular section because I just kept finding teams that I would absolutely dunk on to the point where it just wasn't funny and wasn't fun to watch. It was bullying. It was genuinely bullying. And, like, I know as a content creator, I want to put out content where I look really cool and really good at the game and winning and all that, but we won so easily that it just wasn't entertaining to watch or talk about anymore. So I decided to test this team against some of the previous teams that I've shown you in some of these videos, focusing on a singular team from this. Because there's at least 2 rush teams that I've used recently, or at least pretty rushy teams in various ways. One of them, they seem to have a really bad matchup into just because of how fast it is, and some other aspects. But the other one, if they were built better, if I had perhaps maybe different vision cards that complemented them in different ways, if I pushed really hard for accuracy in a number of ways, I think this team has a lot of potential into evasion, and that's going to be our second matchup, especially Earth evasion. But it was a really hard fight. Like, it really proved just how far evasion has to be pushed to be really powerful. And because, this team was really dominant in Arena. There was a lot of things that it could beat, and it was teams like this, honestly, that gave me the most trouble. But they were built to a different standard than this. I mean, in addition to the other things that I've said here, Shurika has a lot of reincarnations on around this team, which is definitely going to help in Earth. But Lucielle and Gilgamesh really don't as much as I just pulled them. So again, this is not the best team. Similar problem for Agrius and Gilgamesh on the other team, though. But you can see they're already getting a little bit ahead and a little bit of priority. They've got their buffs up nicely. I set this team up good, I gotta say. So Here comes Agrius. We should have confusion resistance. I haven't really focused on poison resistance, but honestly, it would be very easy to set up enough poison resistance to nullify her LB. It's only 25. It's just a Trust Rune slot. I just didn't want to give one of my Trust Rune slots to poison. But well, actually, we're taking damage okay. We're dealing damage pretty good. I will say, I think the other team might, in a lot of ways, be even more fragile than mine, and definitely doesn't have the same sustain and healing capacity in a lot of ways. It's just not how it's built. But, you know, using that speed, power, and synergy, I mean, there's a lot of strong synergies here. There's both a good job VC synergy on the other team. There's also a full elemental synergy. So there's a lot of ways to bring out more of their power in that team as well. And using that to build into their offensive speed and pressure is just, as you can see, really effective here. Although we are starting to put a hurting on Veritas of the Frost. But, yeah, I could not say that we're in a good situation here. This don't seem good. I have the strong premonition that she's about to cast a heal that will never land. How could I have possibly seen that coming? So, I guess this is a strong note for the other team. Like, you know, if you're wondering how strong Veritas of the Frost is, he's definitely the backbone of power on this team, as he's the only fully reincarnated one here. And, you know, he really adds a lot to the rushiness of this team. He is a very, very strong rush unit for that kind of archetype, and that's really not putting me in a good place for this fight. Dang. And we're down. Okay. Not quite. Fey Treachery? Will you be able to cast it? Yeah. Oh, no Great Ram Sucker. Yeah, of course, because your HP was low. Is she gonna stall out for a little bit? Nope. Nope. Gilgamesh sliced straight through that. Alright, so the next matchup is going to be my Earth Evasion team that I took to 6th place in Arena. It is very good. It is not as far pushed for evasion as I've seen some teams, but it's about as far pushed as I think I can get it while still maintaining strategy and power. I don't want it to be just all in on evasion because that doesn't always fully work, but I want it to be all in enough that even a team like this is made to be incredibly accurate and have guaranteed hit are going to have trouble with it. But if you are acknowledging that you're getting into a fight with a guaranteed hit team, especially when they can hit an AoE, you want to have some level of defenses, because you got to acknowledge that you are going to get hit even though you are an evasion team. So I you know, getting up to 6th in Arena really forced me to figure out where that line was kind of optimally. And this was a team that I had a lot of trouble building, a lot of trouble beating. I'm sure I've had trouble building it too, to be fair, as it does require probably some vision cards I haven't even thought of yet. But so far it's going all right. And to be fair, this is not going to be a landslide for either team. This is going to be a hard matchup on either side. And there is a point here, a game-deciding point, over whether or not we land Disable. And I have been fighting a lot of lightning with this team, and I got kind of used to the fact that Lucielle would try to disable me if she couldn't hit me otherwise, and I got close enough to her. So I think I'm running Disable Resistance on the opposing team, which means that she's going to get an opportunity to disable several of my units. She's going to go for it, and it is very unlikely that it's going to land. it could. I think there are still units on my team that she could potentially disable with this, but it is not likely. That being said, this match was close enough that especially if a character like Sodley were to get disabled, it would be very bad for them and probably game ending. That was why I didn't like fighting this team. I did have a chance into it. Like, I can beat the units in a lot of ways. We have the sustain, we have the evasion, to not take that much damage or to force them into guaranteed hit skills. Yeah. No, this matchup is rough. Especially landing the frostbite on the entire team is pretty big too, because this is a very AP hungry team with 2 physical units and woof. So also they're just evasive enough that Shurika is gonna have a tragically low accuracy rate against all of them. Like, really bad. Barely survived that. I don't think we're gonna survive what comes next though. Yeah, this looks bad. So, Shurika does have a lot of earth resistance. I imagine she's probably going to be the last character up if this non-elemental follow-up damage doesn't get her. There it is. So, again, if that had landed disable on Sodley, this would be a very different match. I'm not as scared of Mont because he can get very easily taken out by Shurika, and we can probably sustain her really well, because even 2 earth units focusing on her are going to have difficulty, again, barring that non-elemental follow-up attack. But it's pretty easy. Mont's not that evasive. Sodley is more evasive, and he's kind of above the threshold that we can hit reliably. Like, Halloween Lucio, I think, would have been clinically impossible for Shurika to hit in this matchup. But she has a chance with Sodley, and she has pretty good chances with Mont. So I think this is one of the only times we're going to hit him in this fight, though. And the thing is, like, as a unit, especially as I have him built, we're going to see later he has Tetrasulfid on him. I want to say he has like 25 or 30 wind resistance, which isn't a lot, but kind of like I was saying with Lucielle here, she needs at least a little bit, at least to be positive, to not get wiped out by this. Like, that was already dangerous. And she's now going to have to start healing like every turn, or this happens. So he kind of does the same thing. Like, he's not really scared of anybody on my team, because he has elemental resistances, even to the one that's kind of here to counter him as much as possible. Also, we could have healed both of them. Usually it's not Shurika who's late on the heal, but it happened. Also, she's blind, so she has absolutely no chance of hitting him now. That reduces your accuracy, I want to say, by like 25%, and she probably only had like a 20% chance to hit him anyways, so she's sitting here at -5 until she can get the blindness to wear off, which it has. But she still has pretty abysmal chances of hitting him. If she could have for that last hit, I think we would have won that match. That's how close it came. But yeah, hopefully this has been exciting for you. Thank you for watching. And like and subscribe, do all those things. And be on the lookout for more early releases like this on Discord. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.